Hello, I'm James the Grumpy Petrolhead, and what on earth is this? Please stick around and we'll find out. The story of this bike began in 2017. I had a spare engine for my Norton 16H, which is a 500cc side valve, and I had enough bits to make a decent engine. I had to order a few more bits, but I got a decent engine together. So I thought, what shall I do with this engine? And I think it was on eBay that I saw a Velocette for sale. Well, it was a box of bits. It wasn't a complete bike at all. So we went to have a look, and it was a Velocette 252 stroke from 1936. The bike was, well, it wasn't really a bike. It was literally several boxes of parts, mostly rusty, but it had a frame, and it had some forks and wheels, and it also had a logbook. So I thought, right, this is what I'm going to do. So I bought it. I had no idea whether I was able to get that engine in the frame, so I was quite lucky that I was able to do it. And also I was lucky that I was able to do it with very minimal frame adjustment. There's just a couple of lugs that I've shaved a little bit off, but I haven't messed with any of the frame tubes, so the bike could quite easily go back to being a 250 Velocette if I wanted it to. Well, clearly I'm not an engineer. I'm an enthusiastic hobbyist, would you call it? Tinkerer, enthusiastic tinkerer. I've been tinkering about with bikes and cars for a long time. So I can kind of get things done that I want to get things done, but obviously the quality of the result isn't to true engineering standards. And when I built this and made all the engine brackets and the carb intake, etc., it was a bit of a relearning thing on how to use a lathe, being so long ago since I last used one. But it was great fun. Quite a few years ago, we regularly went on our local vintage motorcycle club runs, and on those runs there was a very large chap who's sadly no longer with us, and he used to ride a 1920s Sunbeam. Now that Sunbeam it looked like it had never been repainted or restored since the day it was made. It was properly patinated. But it used to go very well. It was such a quick bike, and it was so cool in its scruffiness. It didn't even have a side stand, and the chap used to prop it up against a tree or a fence post wherever we happened to be. And that bike used to get some of the most attention. Have you ever gone to a bike meeting? And some of the more scruffier examples seem to get an awful lot of attention, don't they? People seem to they hold a certain fascination. Anyway, this Sunbeam did for me, and I thought it was the coolest thing. So when I went to put this thing together, I had that in mind. So all the fastenings and everything I could find that I needed to build the bike, I wanted to use rusty nuts and bolts or old things, so that, and I've got no intention of painting the tank. What I did was I lightly lacquered it so that hopefully it'll stay as it is. And the result, I think, is for me, is very pleasing. I guess for some people, they might have some purists, you know, and they might have a heart attack when they see this. But that's the thing about motorcycling. There's something for everybody, isn't there? And this sort of thing is really up my street. So to get the engine in the frame, I had to make up these brackets, and very little, well, hardly any modifications to the frame at all to get that engine in there. These lugs here, there's a bottom lug down here, and I just had to shave off a little bit off the bottom lug in order for the frame to fit. So this Velocette frame, if it ever needs to go back to a 252 stroke, it's quite an easy job to put it back, and I'm pleased that I haven't actually damaged or moved any frame tubes at all. So the frame is unmessed with, really. A friend of mine gave me these mud guards, and yeah, I think that mud guard is actually made for that wheel size, 21 inch. And the rear mud guard maybe doesn't fit quite as well, but fits good enough and it looks in keeping. The same pal gave me these handlebars, really nice old patinated handlebars, and they're just the right shape for the bike, so that was fortunate. Of course, in keeping with true vintage style, I had to have myself a lever throttle, which I quite like to use. Cruise control. Oh, and I've also set this lever throttle so that in order to stop the engine, I just simply put it all the way forward, and that will actually close the slide all the way and the engine will stop. It did actually take me a little while to work out how the forks all went together, because it was literally in a box of bits, but I have a couple of other girder fork bikes, so it wasn't actually too bad to work out how it all went. And with the steering head there, I got new cups and bearings because the old ones weren't really serviceable, and that all went together quite nicely. The steering damper here, this is a door handle, as is the gear lever handle. Another door handle. I think they look in keeping though. And the for the friction material in here, I had an old pair of R.M. Williams shoes, which were no longer serviceable, but the leather from the sole was really tough, and it makes an excellent steering damper material. What I wanted to do with the handlebars is vintage style, have the cables go through the bars here and into these inverted levers, which I bought on eBay, but they're awfully shiny, so I left them in the garden for a little while to let them patinate, but it gives that real vintage look. Did the same again for the clutch here, so I was pleased with that. I found this old horn in an auto jumble, so I made a little bracket to put it on the top there. I think it goes very well with this bike. Another pal heard what I was doing, came round to have a look, and he said, well, you'll need a seat for that, so he turned up with a saddle for me. This old saddle he had lying around. I'm not sure if it's actually for a bicycle or a motorbike, but either way, so I made up a little post for it so that it'd slip in the frame, and some little brackets to hold it. So I'll turn this up in here, and yeah, it really looks the part, along with all the wheel spacers and the engine brackets and that I had to make for the engine to fit. I made this here, the intake on the carburettor, and I run that up on my lathe, and I bought a little mini lathe, and I'm not very experienced on lathes. In fact, the last time I really used a lathe was when I was at school, but yeah, it all came back to me, so I was able to fashion this. It is quite a long intake to the head, but it does work, and it starts okay and it goes all right. So, and there's the extra benefit of it doesn't there's a lot of cooling effect, so it's not gonna, the carburettor's not going to get too hot. The only other thing I thought about doing is getting one of those carburettors where the slides sit this way, and then I could maybe have a different carburettor to get it closer. But no, I think that looks good enough. To get the bike past top dead centre or past compression, I made a little tool here just to lift the valve and to make it start easier. But then I realised that these side valves, they have two holes in the cylinder head, one for the spark plug and one for access to the valve. And so the one that I wasn't using, I put this little device here, so I can open up the top of the cylinder head effectively to reduce the compression to start, and then close it. But the compression's low, you don't really need to decompress it to start it. Yes, the exhaust. Well, I made the exhaust out of bits of exhaust that came in the box. There wasn't really a a piece much longer than 2 foot in the whole box, all in bits, and I opted to not put a silencer on. It's not too bad, it does sound fantastic, but I could have, well, if I do put a silencer on there, it'll probably be like a little fishtail one if I do think it's going to annoy the neighbours too much. And I put a little bit of heat wrap here. Now this is heat wrap designed especially on the hottest part of the exhaust, which keeps it hotter so that the exhaust, hot exhaust flows quicker. So that's for performance. Or it could be that I had to weld there and my welding's absolutely terrible and I wanted to hide it. It's one of the two. Now this petrol tank, as it was a 2-stroke, the filler cap has a little measuring device for your 2-stroke oil, and it's got the instructions on here to tell you how much oil per gallon you can put in your 2-stroke. Obviously it's not a 2-stroke anymore. And it had another compartment on this tank here, which really is just this section here, and I think that was just to carry your oil. And there's a large hole underneath the bottom, which I think you could probably run a feed off to fill up your oil tank measurer. And there was also 2 holes underneath. There was a large hole here which fit the tap, and then 2 smaller holes. I'm not really sure what they were for, but I linked them. I don't know if you can see underneath there, quite difficult to see, but I linked both of these holes with a pipe, which means I can get fuel from either side, so I can use every little drop of fuel in the tank. The fuel lines and these oil pipes here, I made them from some copper I ordered and a little pipe bender, and got the fittings, and I wanted to have them best I could as copper pipes rather than rubber, although a bit of a cheat here, look. I don't think this front wheel is for a Velocette. I'm not really sure. It was just in the box of parts, but yeah, it's 21 inch and it's painted green, so I don't know if it's off some military vehicle, but with a bit of jiggery pokery and making some spacers, and I was able to get it to fit. And this tiny little brake here, look, it does work. Can't say it works too well. I got some new brake shoes for it, and just managed to find some and sort of really guess what they were for, and got them to work, but they still need bedding in, so they're not working as good as they're going to. I used the gearbox that it came with. Works very well, quite a sturdy gearbox. Had a quick look inside and everything looked all right, and it all works well. So really all that needed was a bit of fresh oil. So yeah, I went with this hand change arrangement here to keep that vintage look. Well, the most difficult part of putting this thing together was the primary drive, because the engine being so much wider, although it sits nicely in the middle of the frame, it didn't line up with the gearbox, with the clutch. So what I did was I ordered some sprockets and bearings and high tensile steel, and I made this, what would you call it, outrigger arrangement, so that I could use the offset to line up the chain to the clutch so that it would drive the rear wheel. So it took me a little while to figure it all out, and I also decided to up the gearing from a standard Velocette, thinking that a 500 single is going to pull taller gearing than a 252 stroke, and I guessed it, and actually luckily I got it right, and the gearing does feel good. And yeah, so this was a bit of a Heath Robinson affair, and so what I really need to do now next is to make a primary chain cover, because that is a little bit, well, a little bit, it's awfully dangerous, all that flailing around, especially if you forget to tuck your trousers in your boots. You could have a nasty accident there. So that's to be the next project, is to cover that all up. But I was surprised that yeah, it all works very well. Magneto is one of these modern BTH with sort of electronics inside of them which control the advance and retard electronically, and they look the part, and you have to just order them so that they go in the right direction whichever bike you're using, and I'm really pleased with that. So it makes a good spark and it does start easily, and I mounted it on this old AGS matchless Magneto mount that I adapted so that it fits in there nicely. The oil tank, which I think looks rather cool, I made all these brackets to hold the oil tank in, and it fits in there nice. I've actually got a little bit of rubber in there as well to slightly rubber mount it, and I think it's a Norton oil tank. I had it lying around, but it yeah, fits in there lovely. A pal of mine with a steadier hand than me, he wrote this on the back for me. Made in England in my shed. And another pal of mine gave me this AA badge, which looks rather fetching, I think, on the back there. Surprisingly, this bike is legal. I sent some paperwork off to the DVLA explaining that I've got a new engine and had to show them some pictures, etc. And they went for it. So the bike is actually legal. Extraordinary. But I know what you're wondering. Does it actually go? And can I actually ride this Frankenstein of a machine? I'll show you. What about you? Do you like this sort of thing? Or does this sort of thing give you nightmares? Let us know in the comments, but please be kind. Like I said, I'm not an engineer. I'm just enjoying myself. Well, I do hope you've enjoyed this latest episode of the Grumpy Petrolhead. And if you have, and you want to look at some more old cars and motorbikes, please have a look at our previous videos. There's quite a few on there now. We're starting to build up a few videos of old bikes and tinkering and things. And also stick around, because in the next week or so we have a new addition to our collection, and the clue is it's to add to our 70s superbike collection. So if you think you can guess what it is, please let us know and see if you're right. So thanks for popping round, and see you next time. Cheerio.